it's not just teenagers and children that think that a period is dirty. It's adults. I mean, I hear like aunties say it. I hear cousins not, you know, like, you must make food because we're bleeding, you know, and it's like, huh? But like, I'm not sitting with my hands in my vagina all day, you know, like, and now making food or something. I'm still hygienic, and looking after myself. But just because I'm bleeding, I'm now seen as, you know, like, dirty and unhygienic and unsanitary, and that's a myth. I'm not gonna give you my full name. No. Loren Loubster. I mean, I think throughout high school I was given like quite a few, and now it's just always Lulas. But like from chunky, because I got chubbier as I got older, to like man stem, duck stem, 5 corp, you know, like, it was always either the voice or the forehead. All the cousins, you know. I identify as a colored woman firstly, and then when I'm feeling brave, I identify as a queer colored woman, but not always, and not in every space, and not at home. Tainted and fucked up, trying to move forward without, you know, addressing the past or helping the past. We look for ways of how people should just move on and better themselves, and that they have opportunity, and that there's now resources and access, but there isn't actually for everyone, and we still have people, you know, we can't really fight equally if we are kind of held back. I feel constantly afraid and needing to kind of put on this masculine shield to survive, and fight and be taken seriously. But yeah, I'm either constantly afraid for myself or for my sister or for my nieces or for my family or for teenagers that we work with. I'm just like, that's what we have, that's where we go to the toilet, that's where we have to walk, that's our reality still, like, yeah. Femme Projects started out as an organization that went into schools and delivered a sanitary product called the Menstrual cup, and we used to facilitate like an interactive, fun, you know, way of talking about sex, talking about gender, talking about sexualities, talking about STDs and STIs and pregnancy, and then we had like, you know, other themes in there of careers and futures and goals and dreams, and then we've grown so much from that. You know, we do a lot of advocacy work and our campaign work, and we sell t-shirts to make funds, you know, like we're hustling, you know, and we're trying to create awareness and challenge people, and, you know, like being in an airport with a massive vagina on your chest and people either reacting positively or really negatively, and using that opportunity to educate and to ask, you know, like for funding, you know, let's be real, we need money to do what we want to do. But yeah, our program has become so open that we don't have to go into schools, and we don't have to stick to a strict mandate of, like, you know, when we went into schools, we kind of hid the fact that we're not going to talk about like abstaining, like that's not going to be on the list, because the reality is that I have 6 girls sitting in this group that are pregnant, and 2 have already had a baby, and now you're going to make me say that you must abstain. Then I'm passing on a shame, you know. And we just use every opportunity that we can to create a brave space where you can talk about anything, and where we were missing that as teenagers, or some of us were like, you know, I was punished all the time for talking about sex, and now I do it as a career, you know. And I'm still the friend that talks about sex all the time. I'm that person, and I think Femme opens up those conversations in any space. Like, we can go to a corporate space and be like, yo, like, you know, people are not being friendly towards women while they are menstruating, you know, let's have a conversation around that. and facilitate around that. You know, like we are as diverse as the group that we are facilitating, and we've had to think on our feet so much that like I can create a program like that. You know, like I'm gonna be like, oh, who's the audience, who's the people, let's make it a reality for you. Yeah. Strangely, like the first time I knew about a period was at home. Like I knew that my mom got a period. I knew when I got a period. But when I actually learnt properly about a period was only in high school. And I'd had my period since the age of 12. So there was like a good, you know, like 5-year gap before I knew actually what a period is and how a period works and, you know, why I'm getting it. And then only through doing Femme's work did I realize, you know, like break away from the stigma of a period. But I learned, like the word learned came so late. Well, I wish that I was taught that, you know, sex is not this shameful thing, and that experimenting at like a really young age sexually is normal, you know. I wish that, I don't know what we're currently learning in life orientation that goes, you know, like when you're in maths and you learn something like trigonometry and then you leave school and you're like, oh, when the fuck am I ever going to use this trigonometry shit? Why wasn't I taught something, you know, that I'm going to use? I feel the same with life orientation. Why was there so much focus towards like what career path you're going to choose, or you know, like STIs and STDs, and like putting a sense of like fear in you? Why weren't we ever taught about, you know, experimenting and figuring out how it works before, you know, you let someone else figure it out? You know, that like masturbating is normal, and that you know, playing with friends is normal at a young age. I think back and I'm like, thank goodness I was just being naughty, and I was, you know, experimenting and seeing how other vaginas works and penises work before actually having sex. I wasn't, you know, afraid when I did start having sex. I then kind of prepared myself in some ways. You know, it's not spoken about enough in schools, and it's definitely the mandate of abstaining in schools is, it's just not a reality, and it's not safe. It's hindering so many teenagers. We sit with such a high teenage pregnancy rate, and that teenage pregnancy rate, the age gets younger and younger, and there's just an education that's missing, you know, because teachers don't want to start the discussion and end up thinking that I made it okay for them to have sex and now someone's sitting pregnant, or someone's had to drop out because, you know, I gave them advice and they didn't take it. Or I think there's also a thing missing of like healthy and safe sex. You know, we give the fear of STDs and STIs, but we don't really discuss, you know, different condoms or ways of protecting yourself, or if you're not having penetrative sex with a male and female, you know, that what other things are there to use, you know, and then you only learn that on your own journey and by mistakes and when you're much older. There's definitely a stigma because of miseducation and not learning, you know, and just not discussing it. And that's what happens with sex as well, is that if you just avoid the conversation, doesn't mean that it's not happening, it doesn't mean that the conversation's not happening. In high schools, learners are asking each other, you know, and they're not getting the information necessarily from the correct source or from a factual source. They're getting it from friends or from older cousins or from family members. And there's this massive stigma around a period being dirty and being disgusting and gross and mosach and, you know, fail and stinky, and that's a miseducation. You know, like, your period isn't dirty, and the reason why something isn't smelling good is not because of the period, it's because you're using a pad for the whole day. You're sitting 12 hours, 8 hours playing sports. It's soaking up sweat, it's soaking up discharge, it's sitting there all day, and you're trying to make it last long because you don't have another one. And that's what's smelling, but what's coming out is your vagina and your uterus literally cleansing a wall of tissue and blood, which if I had a cut, it wouldn't be as gross. But because it's coming from my vagina, it's gross. So then, is the vagina what's gross? Is the uterus what's gross? Is it that people don't understand what's happening, and that's why it's seen as, you know, dirty? And it's not just teenagers and children that think that a period is dirty. It's adults. I mean, I hear like aunties say it. I hear cousins not, you know, like, you must make food because we're bleeding, you know, and it's like, but like, I'm not sitting with my hands in my vagina all day, you know, like, and now making food or something. I'm still hygienic, and looking after myself, but just because I'm bleeding, I'm now seen as, you know, like, dirty and unhygienic and unsanitary, and that's a myth, and we just carry it on generation after generation, and women especially. I think I'm really privileged in having memories and experiences with Kim and Kelly in Femme since 2014, you know, like going into schools and hearing the most bizarre questions that in the moment we laugh and we're like, okay, I didn't expect that. But then it's like, but damn, thank you for asking the question, because then we are challenged, they are challenged, peers are challenged, and we just have like a real conversation, whether it be around, you know, like, how do I squirt, you know, like from a 17-year-old girl going like, huh? Like, do we answer it? Do I tell you what to do? You know, like simple things of, you know, also when someone asks a question that we assume everyone knows, you know, like how many holes a vagina has. And then realizing how, like, doing the statistics of reading questionnaires and seeing how many girls that do not know their own, like, anatomical vagina, you know, like what's actually happening. And we used to laugh and we used to get like upset and we used to be like, this is unfair. But I think the journey of Femme is such a privilege because we just get to discuss everything and anything. And, you know, like if there's something up with my vagina, Kim knows, because I'm like, girl, wait, I need to ask this question quickly, just wait, just don't judge, just answer the question. You know, there's definitely a safe space. I think the role of a sisterhood can be very, you know, important, and there is a massive responsibility. But I think that sisterhood can't just be peers. You know, if I think about me in school, we had a group of, we were like 6 teenage girls, and one of us led the group about sex, one led the group about menstruation, one led the group about, like, you know, pubic hair and stuff. Boys issues, and then one was like matric dance craze, you know. But we needed somebody that was either older or much younger, and we needed a group of more diverse, you know, like just so that we had more facts and more truths, because I think now I see such a responsibility on myself in every situation that I'm in. I work with another organization in Ocean View, and we're mostly with boys because we have a baseball team. It does have teenage girls in, but there are a lot of boys. And I see the responsibility in being a big sister to them and checking them when they say something that's extremely misogynistic. And, you know, also educating them about menstruation, and so that when someone says something is dirty and gross, I'm like, hold on, can I just have 10 minutes to just do a facilitation quickly, you know? So there is a massive responsibility as a sisterhood, but I think you can create that sisterhood on your own. And with the group that you find yourself in or that you're connected to, yeah, I think as long as you feel comfortable and that the space is non-judgment, you know, and it's judgment-free, and it's a safe space that everyone's opinion is equal, whether I'm an adult and I'm talking to a child, or an adult speaking to an adult, that we're equal and that we can hear each other out. Yeah. Sexual liberation to me is just allowing myself to explore and be and do whatever I want to do with my body sexually, but can never be sexually liberated if my sister or my friend or my peers or the youth is not in the same position. If it's unsafe for someone to walk around in the identity that they're wanting to choose because of circumstances of community or where they are, where they find themselves, or you know, the reality of coming out to family members or to peers, then there isn't a true sexual liberation for myself. If I can't stand as a 28-year-old and say I'm bisexual and I'm queer and I fuck whoever I want to fuck and I dream about whoever I want to dream about and I play with whoever I want to play, if I'm not able to do that because of fear and mistreatment and judgment and not feeling safe, then I myself don't have a sexual liberation, and I can only imagine what the youth is going through and what other peers are going through. And I come from a home where my mom protects us from everything, and I'm sure if I came out to her and just had a real conversation, it should be cool. But I still feel that major sense of fear. And my friends that live in communities with uncles or with grandparents, you know, and want to do the same thing, we don't all have that luxury of being ourselves and of doing what we want to do safely, you know. And I think that that's because it's missing at home. The conversation's missing at home. It's missing with children. It's missing with teenagers. It's missing with adults. And we do it because we are fearful or because we just don't have the knowledge. And the knowledge is there. We can read about it now. We can go online. We can teach each other. We can open up the conversation to grandparents and parents and uncles and aunts and have the conversation so that they can understand. But there's just so much fear around it. And I think that the schools are skipping that as well. You know, we're just too scared to say what sexualities there are and what you can do and what's okay. So we just don't talk about it. Sit properly.
Yeah, the chair makes noise, so you really...
No, Mr. Posh.
No,
that's
really.
You can't see your height in the video.
Come in.
Let me know when you're ready.
I'm cool.